Hi, Pamela.
Hi, Adela. It's nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. I'm so excited we get to spend a few minutes chatting with each other today.
Exactly. And just to share with everybody else, my name is Pamela Vergara Rodriguez. I'm a physician and I work at Cook County Hospital at the Core Center. I'm an internist psychiatrist and an addiction medicine doctor. And I am here to talk to lovely Adela, who I'll let her introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Adela Carlin. I'm a community lawyer and I work with a coalition, Illinois Partners for Human Service. We are a statewide coalition, and my pronouns are she and ella. And part of my work is building partnerships with community-based organizations that provide health and human services across the state. I'm really excited to be here chatting with Pamela.
Yes, yay. So we wanted to start off today just to talk about ageism, right? We're here as part of the swag coaches, and we want to start with figuring out, Adela, how do we define ageism?
I think it's a great place to start. We actually have a definition that we've been using in our state and across the country that I want to share with you and everyone. Ageism is a form of discrimination against older people due to negative and inaccurate stereotypes. So it's discrimination against older people due to negative and inaccurate stereotypes. And it shows up in our work, our community, all the spaces that we occupy. Often it shows up hidden in casual comments about aging as being something that we don't want, that is about decline, loss of independence, somehow loss of interest in activities that we enjoyed throughout our lives.
Absolutely. And I think that, this sort of reflects some internal stigma that we have about the process of aging rather than it being something that maybe would help us say, "Oh, wow, I'm aging. I'm wiser. I know more about myself. I know more about where I want to be and what I want to do." Somehow it's a negative, right? And I see it in the healthcare world all the time because we assume a lot of things about people at a certain age, right? Sometimes we think that once someone reaches a certain age, that they're not interested in changing their habits. They're not interested in starting to exercise or maybe, I don't know, learning a new language or starting to learn a new musical, or even making an effort to change their diet. Whereas I see folks at any age maybe might have difficulty with that. And then I have some folks who are definitely older and also changing their diets, drinking more water, exercise, walking, telling me they're using their resistance bands. So some of this comes from the system.
Yeah, society at large, I think those views of ageism have been passed on to us. We internalize them. Uh, the good news is that we're learning more about it. We're also learning that having a positive view on aging, a more complete view of aging as something we all aspire to do, something we hope to have the privilege to do, that it actually increases our lifespan. It increases the likelihood that we're going to have longer thriving lives, just thinking positively about aging and then having honest conversations like we are having today.
Yes, I think we have to talk about it more openly. And it's understandable we might have fears about it too, right? There might be fears about what is going to come. But if we openly discuss those things, then they can be addressed. I think, especially for instance, at least in the healthcare world, I work in the HIV field, and lots of times I'll find that um, we forget to ask about sexuality at a certain age. We somehow assume that it's no longer part of the discussion, so we may not offer PrEP, pre-exposure prophylaxis, or PEP, post-exposure prophylaxis to a certain age group, or even consider testing for STDs, or even consider testing for HIV, which I think is a huge assumption about sexual life at any age, right?
Absolutely. And today just happens to be Ageism Awareness Day here in Illinois and other parts of the country where people like us who are working in health and human services are really trying to have that honest conversation, but also that critical look at our systems, policies, and practices to see, are we really fully serving people throughout the life course, embracing all of our different parts of our identity and really taking care of mind, body, and soul. And so it's a really critical time. What some of the things I've learned in my work about how ageism can be really harmful is also thinking that ageism is something that we all experience the same way, when in reality, aging is an accumulation of our life experiences and opportunities. And so the way that we live our lives is going to have a real impact on our ability to continue to thrive as we age. And I say we because we're all aging every day. Um, we also know that there's a lot of barriers to access services throughout our life course. I wanted to talk a little bit about that with you. What are some of the barriers that you think people are experiencing, especially in this very tumultuous time, very, challenging
Absolutely.
time in our country?
Absolutely. Just today, I had several patients who said they were too afraid to come to the clinic to be seen because of their immigration status. I have other patients who are transgendered, and they often will say, especially since the beginning of the changes around discussions of transgender care, discussions around LGBTQ care, they're worried. They're worried they're not going to access care and, in fact, have lost some access to care already. Um, and there's no question that the way things are going right now, we have to discuss openly that even in the world of the medical community, research, things that are impacted by government funding, even saying the words LGBTQA plus, even saying that could be something that somebody might footnote as problematic is astounding and I think very scary. And we have to slow down and just sit with that for a moment because this is the discrimination and stigma coming back full circle for us to realize that for all of the progress that we have made, there is a very long road ahead. The access to care is being cut down, and we individually, myself as an ally, as an advocate, have to do my part in making sure that we maintain that access to care.
I think, yeah, as allies and advocates, that we're being called to do that, right? To uh, ground ourselves in knowing that LGBTQ older adults are a part of our rural and urban communities across the state, are a part of every ethnic and racial group, are part of so many of our communities that we can't ignore what's happening, and we have to have the courage to address it. Our strategies may be different, but the courage and the care and the passion, I think, has to stay the same, if not more.
Absolutely. We have to name stigma, right? We know that stigma exists for many different intersecting identities. And we have to be very specific, as you once mentioned to me, about specifically what discrimination is occurring so that we can pull it apart and we can change it, or at least start with ourselves in our own language, start with ourselves in our own understanding that we all have biases, right? That we all are we're human and that we will have unknown biases and need to keep discovering them. So we have to do that work now more than ever, I think.
Yeah, another great thing we've learned from research, right, is that when we acknowledge and understand that we all carry biases, that is like the first step to addressing them and doing better, being better providers, advocates, allies in all our ways. I wanted to touch on a couple of things that I've also learned from talking to you to hopefully help participants in the SWAG team just carry some things forward about what we can all do to ensure that we are providing the best advocacy and services possible. Are there any things that you can think of that we can do now to really continue to learn and center the experiences of LGBTQ older adults, and including older adults who are living with HIV, who may be concerned about disclosing any parts of their identities in order to get services or in order to get housing and other things that are very basic needs?
So, Lily, I think first and foremost is making ourselves accessible and available. Now, by accessible, I don't just mean that someone can make an appointment with you, but accessible in our attitudes, right? Accessible in that maybe I don't know all of the ins and outs of whatever your practices are, the things that you need to do to get on by, but I will be here to listen and to guide you to the next person, whomever is the right person to help you the most, whether it's housing, whether it's getting medications, whether it's this insurance coverage, right? I'm going to use my resources. I may not have all the answers. In fact, I'm certain I don't have all the answers. Um, but I'm here to listen. First and foremost, listen. We're not lucky right now to necessarily be able to have um, people who reflect ourselves always, right? So we know that we are lacking, especially in the healthcare community, we are lacking LGBTQ providers. We are lacking sufficient staff, registration staff that look and remind us of ourselves. So because we don't have that, we have to make the extra effort, right, to make sure that we're always there listening and acknowledging whatever privilege we may have, acknowledging that we don't know everything. We need to find out. Uh, we can't assume that any one person is going to know everything. And really starting with that, looking every system looking inside within itself, right? It's not just individuals. Our whole community needs to change.
Oh, I love that. And I think that's what I would add is that we need to take a really critical look at our systems of care all across and ask ourselves, are our systems really ensuring that all of us thrive as we age? Or is there a lack of understanding about what happens when we age and we're older and we belong to communities that have experienced discrimination, marginalization, lack of research, lack of investment? And when we take that critical look, I think that's where we will find those opportunities to advocate, and not alone, but with each other. And also learning in real time what people are experiencing, being open to saying what may have worked a year ago, 2 years ago, under a different administration, it may not work now. One example I'm hearing a lot from our coalition partners is data and access to resources that was shared widely, that was, like standard, now is being questioned, now has to be protected, preserved. And we have to think about data in very different ways than we did just 9 months ago.
Yes, absolutely. We are at a critical time, right? It's a critical time, and we have to be, I think, creative,
Yeah.
right, in the way to be able to continue to get data because we all know we need the data to be able to advocate for policy change. That's
Yeah.
what it comes down to. I wanted to kind of go back to something you mentioned about that we're all changing
Yeah.
because it's so important to realize that just because we may have one conversation with someone and they may have a particular point of view at that point in time. I just give an example of, let's say I'm having a conversation with someone who's having difficulty getting up their stairs. And, maybe at that time I might mention, What if we consider an apartment that has an elevator or something like that? And let's say that person is not interested in that at that moment. And so then I just check off like I've had that conversation, but I have to be remembering that people change their minds all the time. And age has nothing to do with that. So I have to be remembering as a provider that I have to go back to the questioning at what point someone might be ready for a change as they are aging and as functionality changes. And functionality can change for potentially the better, or it can also change for the worse, but I have to be open to the options that functionality can improve, right? That it's not always just going to go downhill, and be cognizant that I need to offer those interventions that are available to me, like physical therapy, um, like referrals to behavioral health, like a referral to substance use treatment if needed, maybe a referral to housing, maybe a referral, right? So I need to be cognizant of always offering those things, knowing that people can change their minds at any time, and age has nothing necessarily to do with that. That even at a particular, it's not like we stop growing, we keep growing and we keep changing as we continue to age. All of us do.
That's so true. And none of us want to be invisible. None of us want to be ignored. All of us want to be recognized for who we are at that moment, who we are as a full person, not a legal issue or a medical issue, but a full person. Well,
Yes.
Pamela, I've enjoyed it so much. Is there any sort of final thoughts you want to share before we wrap up today?
You know, one thing I wanted to bring up was that for particularly for people with HIV who are aging is that, especially long-term survivors, you know, they've had to go through many years of disclosing and disclosing and disclosing. And we have to do our job to make it easier to accept that disclosure and not make it work for them to continue to disclose, whether it's their status, whether it's their gender, whether it's, their sexual preference, orientation. We have to make the full circle so that that constant disclosure doesn't become a chore, at least not in the systems that should support them.
Oh, thank you. I think I would just add that my final thoughts is that we continue to learn about how discrimination impacts the lives of LGBTQ older adults. Racism continues to be a crisis in our country. Um, Discrimination based on sexual orientation is real. It's happening in our workplaces, in our medical field. It's happening in our health and housing systems. So just being mindful that all those are realities that people are facing every day, and then learning more about them so that we can provide the supports that are needed to achieve our goals and live full lives.
Yes, that's the goal. Thank you so much, Adela, and thank you everyone for watching.
Thank you, Pamela. Be well.
Be well. Bye-bye.
Bye.